April 15th, 2014. 325 students from Danwon High School in Ansan board the MV Sewol Ferry at Incheon Port, excited for their annual field trip to Jeju Island. They're second-year students, mostly 16 and 17 years old, traveling with 15 teachers. This is the trip they've looked forward to for months. A break from intense academic pressure, a chance to explore South Korea's most beautiful island with friends. They settle into cabins, take selfies, send messages to parents. The overnight crossing should take 13 hours. By morning, they'll reach Jeju. None of them know they're boarding a death trap, an illegally modified ferry overloaded with cargo, operated by a company that prioritized profit over safety, sailing into waters it can't handle. By tomorrow afternoon, 250 of these students will be dead, and their deaths will be broadcast live on national television. The Sewol was built in Japan in 1994 as the Ferry Naminoi, operating safely for 18 years between Kagoshima and Okinawa. In 2012, Chonghejin Marine purchased it and spent 6 months modifying the vessel, adding extra passenger decks, expanding cargo space, making it more profitable. These modifications increased gross tonnage by 239 tons and dangerously shifted the ship's center of gravity upward, making it top-heavy and unstable. The Korean Register approved these changes based on falsified documents. On April 16, 2014, Sewol carries twice its legal cargo limit, 1,157 tons instead of 587 tons. The cargo isn't properly secured. The ballast water that should stabilize the ship has been reduced to accommodate more freight. It's a maritime disaster waiting to happen, and at 8:50 a.m., it does. The Sewol enters Maenggol Channel, notorious for strong underwater currents. The captain, 69-year-old Lee Jun-seok, isn't on the bridge. An inexperienced third mate is steering. At 8:48 a.m., she executes a sharp turn, possibly to avoid rocks, possibly to correct course. The overloaded, top-heavy ferry can't handle it. Unsecured cargo shifts violently to the left. The ship begins tilting. Within seconds, it's listing at 30 degrees, then 45 degrees. Passengers feel the deck tilt beneath them. Objects slide across floors. Students stumble, grab railings, laugh nervously, thinking it's temporary. At 8:52 a.m., a student named Choi calls emergency services on his cell phone. His voice shakes. "Save us! We're on a ship and I think it's sinking." It's the first distress call. He won't survive. At 8:58 a.m., the ship's intercom crackles. The crew's message is clear. Do not move. Stay in your current location. Students obey. They're trained to follow authority. Teachers tell them to remain calm, stay in cabins. The announcement repeats, "Stay put, wait for further instructions." Meanwhile, the captain and most crew members abandon ship. Lee Jun-seok, wearing only underwear and a sweater to hide his identity, is among the first rescued by Coast Guard vessels. Crew members flee without issuing evacuation orders, without helping passengers, without doing their jobs. They save themselves while telling 300 students to stay trapped inside a sinking ferry. Those who obey the intercom instructions die. Those who ignore orders and scramble to the deck survive. It's that simple, that cruel. The Korea Coast Guard patrol vessel 123 arrives at 9:07 a.m., 9 minutes after the distress signal. Captain Kim Kyong-il circles the tilting ferry. He doesn't order passengers to evacuate. He doesn't organize rescue. He waits for instructions from superiors. Precious minutes tick away. The ship continues sinking. At 9:38 a.m., 40 minutes after the first distress call, fishing boats and private vessels arrive and begin rescuing people from the deck. They pull students from the water, grab those clinging to railings. More than half of the 172 survivors are rescued by civilian boats, not the Coast Guard. But by then, it's too late for most. The ferry is nearly capsized. Hundreds remain trapped inside, following orders to stay put. South Korean media initially reports that all 476 people aboard were rescued. Families celebrate. Then, the truth emerges. The numbers were wrong. Only 172 survived. 304 are missing, presumed trapped inside. The ferry continues sinking throughout the morning. By 10:31 a.m., only the hull remains visible. Television cameras broadcast live as the ship disappears beneath the surface. Parents watching from shore scream at rescuers to save their children. Coast Guard boats circle uselessly. Divers aren't deployed during the critical first hours when air pockets might have sustained life. The government cites strong currents as justification for delayed rescue. But civilian boats had no trouble reaching the ferry. The excuses ring hollow. Families watch their children drown on live television while authorities do nothing. Inside the submerged ferry, students send final messages. Kakao Talk texts to parents, "Mom and Dad, I love you." Videos filmed on phones show water rising in cabins, students in life jackets huddled together. One diver later describes finding a boy and girl whose life jacket cords were tied together. They didn't want to leave each other even in death. Rescue divers work for weeks, recovering bodies from the wreck. They describe nightmares, opening cabin doors to find classrooms of students still seated at desks, having followed orders to stay put. The confirmed death toll rises slowly. 171 by April 24th, 294 by July 22nd. The final count, 304 dead, 172 survivors. 82% of casualties were children. An entire generation of Danwon High School students wiped out. The aftermath brings rage. Investigations reveal systematic failure at every level. Chonghejin Marine illegally modified the ship and overloaded it with cargo. Regulators accepted falsified safety documents. The captain and crew abandoned passengers. The Coast Guard failed to execute basic rescue procedures. President Park Geun-hye's administration botched the response, prioritizing public relations over saving lives. Her government initially refused international rescue assistance. They pumped diesel-contaminated air into the hull, killing anyone who might have survived in air pockets. They lied about rescue progress. On May 8th, Chonghejin CEO Kim Han-sik is arrested. In November 2015, Captain Lee Jun-seok receives life imprisonment for murder. The court rules his abandonment constituted intentional killing. 14 crew members get up to 12 years. Coast Guard Captain Kim Kyong-il receives 3 years for negligent manslaughter. Over 150 people are eventually indicted for roles in the disaster. But justice doesn't heal trauma. Danwon High School becomes a memorial. Empty desks in classrooms bear messages from surviving students. "If I see you again, I'll tell you I love you, because I haven't said it to you enough." Parents of victims form Sewol Families for Truth and a Safer Society, demanding full investigation and accountability. They demonstrate in Central Seoul for years, enduring police crackdowns and government suppression. The disaster becomes a political catalyst. Public outrage contributes to President Park's eventual impeachment in 2017 for unrelated corruption. But her botched Sewol response destroyed her credibility. The ferry was finally raised from the ocean in 2017, 3 years after sinking. Remains of 9 victims were found inside. It now sits at Mokpo Port, a rusted monument to negligence. The Sewol disaster haunts South Korea's collective psyche like no other modern tragedy. It wasn't a natural disaster or unpreventable accident. It was human failure at every level. Corporate greed, regulatory corruption, government incompetence, criminal negligence. 304 people died because adults in positions of authority valued profits over safety, protocol over action, public image over truth. Most painful is knowing they could have been saved if the crew had ordered evacuation, if the Coast Guard had acted decisively, if anyone had prioritized rescue over covering up mistakes. Students died because they followed orders from adults who abandoned them. That betrayal of trust, children obeying authority figures who led them to death, shattered fundamental social bonds in Korean culture. 10 years later, families still fight for answers. Annual memorials draw thousands. Yellow ribbons symbolizing the victims appear across the country every April. The question remains unanswered. Why did rescue come too late? Not because it was impossible, because those responsible chose inaction over courage, self-preservation over duty. 304 people drowned while rescuers watched. That's the legacy of Sewol, a ferry that sank with students inside, killing children who trusted the wrong people.